All right, so a state of emergency was declared for St. Catherine on June 17, a couple of days ago by Prime Minister Andrew Holness, well, 3 days ago, due to the high level of crime in the parish. Zooming in to give us his thoughts on what's happening and how it's affecting residents is chairman of the 10,000 Men and Families Movement, Bishop Dr. Rowan Edwards. Bishop, morning, sir. Welcome to Smile Jamaica. How are you?
Morning, sir. Very good to have you. And you're very loud here in Spanish Town, too.
Great to have you, sir.
Yes, sir.
We don't usually have enough time when we're talking about stuff like this. I want to go to something that attributed to you. Well, earlier, you heard the State Minister, Homer Davis, who suggested that the politicians must kind of have a chat to meet with the, well, I'll use the word criminals. You said the church is ready to negotiate. This is what we have done many times. Let's start there. Explain what you mean when you say that.
Thank you for asking, sir. I heard what Mr. Homer Davis said, but listen, the church is always working to bring peace in communities. It's not just yesterday or the day before, years. We've been negotiating, we've been taking in prisoners. I've taken in myself, I've taken in quite a lot of them, and it has to go through negotiation. We said, okay, we'll take you in based on this, based on that. So we have seen quite a number of times that when we go into communities, we have to meet with these guys and say to them, hey, your way of doing things not working, right? We have to change the way we do things. And this is what we're saying. We have to get to the place whereby which we can let these men and women too, who are involved in destroying this nation, know that this is not Jamaica in the 21st century.
When you say, sorry to jump in, Bishop, but when you use the word negotiate, what is that? That's what I want. When you
negotiate means to have a talk. Talk. Let's reason things out. That's my way of negotiating. We're telling the gunmen, sir, you got to drop them wicked weapons that you're using to destroy our nation. Negotiating means that we want to talk about the progress of this nation. Negotiating means we got to tell the men, one shot, when you fire one shot and you create a wound in a man's body, and that person has to be taken into the hospital, it is costing the government $500,000 per week to nurse one gunshot in hospital. That's negotiating.
Hey,
we
Bishop,
want to tell the men what you're doing is wrong.
Bishop, when you say to them that one wound is $500,000 for the government, I mean, do they really care? I'm curious because you're on the ground and the churches have been so important in that role, in community engagement, community negotiation, as you put it. I am curious before we head to this. Let's go back and think about the symptoms, the causes. What are these young men and women telling you about why it is they're engaging in the activities that they're engaging in? Why is it becoming heightened? What is going on? Why people becoming so ruthless and just don't care and just killing people every day? What is that about?
Let me say this. You don't kill a tree by pruning it or cutting off limbs. We got to get to the root, the bottom cause of why this nation is where it is. Can I tell you the reason? We go as far back as the Buccaneers. We go as far back as Mr. Henry Morgan. When Jamaica was the most wickedest, well, Port Royal was the most wickedest place in Jamaica. We go back as to slavery. When the slave masters cut our men, beat them, and carry on and rape our women, we go back to the whole aspect of what used to happen when our politicians in this country used to give men guns to control their turf and they build their garrisons to stay in power. We got to go back there. We need to get the leaders, the now leaders, to confess to the nation that they did wrong. That maybe some of these new ones are not involved, but their predecessors, they were involved in handing out guns to keep the community, and now they build their garrisons, and they kept the people poor in order to get votes. We need to get back there. And we need to have these guys confessing. We need to see the now leader of the opposition, the now prime minister, holding hands together in front of this nation and say, hey, we did wrong. Our predecessors, we did wrong in handing guns to these gunmen, make them guns to control their turf so that we stay in power. They need to come and confess. They need to tell the people, we cannot continue this way anymore.
So
these
Bishop,
guns that they have built have now taken over. And the handouts that they used to give them is not enough anymore. So they built their towers and they're doing their own thing. And they're having these gangs, 400 gangs running this nation. The leaders and now leaders needs to get to the bottom of it and deal with it.
so tell me how they build the cat now. So the situation is out of control. You're suggesting they need to confess, one. You're saying.
I want to see the now leaders, the
Yes.
prime minister of the country. I need to see the leader of the opposition holding hands together on national television and said, we did wrong.
And then what? And then how do we?
Garrisons.
And then what's the fix? After that, how do they fix it? How do they reach these same young men to say no more?
Well, it's gonna take, as I said, negotiating. Some form of negotiation needs to take place where the church, the politician, the business people, and some of the business people are involved in this thing because they're paying in order to keep their business going.
Yeah, Bishop.
The whole aspect of extortion is big. So we need to talk to the business people.
Yep.
We need to talk to the criminals. We need to talk to the church. Everybody, the government have to sit together around a table and pave the way forward. It's about a long-term
Bishop, I'm gonna jump in. I'm gonna
to
jump in again. I'm not certain I disagree with you, but I'm also not certain you kind of answered Simone's question. I'm gonna read something again that's attributed to you. I have a church in the One Order area and one in the Klansman area. I talk to these guys. They still respect the church. The church christens their babies, bury their dead, and they still confide in some of the pastors. Then, if that is so, sir, why are they still running all over the place? Which is the question Sim asked up front. And I'll end my thought with a question. Is the church failing all of us?
No, the church is not failing, sir. But at the same time, the amount of guns that are in the hands of these guys, we need to... I said this about 15 years ago, that we need to, the government should actually work with these guys. If these guys have AK-47, they're not going to just hand it over. So these AK-47s making millions. They have to sit with the guys. There are countries around the world that does this, right? Sit with the guys and say, hey, can we give you something for this? Right?
What does that mean? What do you mean when you say? What do you mean when you say, "Can I give you something for this"? What does that mean?
These guys have loads of men working with them. Set up the way how they operate, how these men operate. They have loads of men who are working with them. They're very influential. What they need to do is to say, all right, guys, we'll build this factory for you. You run it. Get your men to run it. Get somebody else on the other side. Give them lands and say, hey, there has to be a place. What the sense a man who, unless he's a man who's converted and he becomes a Christian, and that's what the church is doing too. We're getting out in the communities and we're telling men to turn to God. We just had a crusade in Old Harbor. Loads of men turn to God, and that's what we're doing. But if a man doesn't turn to God, put him in prison, and prison doesn't change. They become worse. So what we got to do is meet them on their turf and say, hey, we're going to do this for you. We're going to help you. Let the church come on board and reason with these guys, because they're not going to hand over their guns. Their guns are making them millions. And so therefore, we got to open their understanding and say, hey, what you're doing is destroying this nation. You know how many schools have been closed in Spanish Town last week?
Yeah.
You know how many businesses have been closed because of these guys who are terrorizing the area? We got to meet with them and open their understanding to what is going on.
Yeah, there are a lot of people who would say, open their eyes wide and say, give them lands and build factories. What? And then there's another school of thought that says, having been cultured in this way to make millions a week from extortion, from gun racketeering, from gun running, these people do not want work, sir. They don't want to make an honest living that can make them 1/100th of what they are able to do, sitting by and doing nothing or creating havoc. What are your thoughts on that?
They have to start somewhere. I said three things. You create an environment for the men to change and to change their way of living. 2, they get arrested. Or 3, they get killed. You got to get to this position whereby which you said, okay, if I open the door for you and you didn't walk in there and you get killed, that's your fault. And your family's fault. So
do they fear death though, Bishop? You find that they fear death?
Oh, many of them, when the gun is held at their head, they bawl like babies. That's what I'm told.
All right.
They're killing people, but when the gun is at their head, they bawl like baby. Please don't kill me. So so we got to get to the place whereby which we start to reason with these guys. And listen, the church is declaring that this year murder must go down. The pastors are meeting next week across this island. Pastors are coming together, and we're going to have this meeting to really determine what is the church's response. And we're going to look at ways where we're affirming the aspect of what telling people what this nation is and what we need to do.
Bishop,
yes, I mean, we're going to prophesy to this nation that it cannot work this way. We're going to talk to the people of this nation and let them know murder has to drop. We have 5 months left to deal with this, right? To drop it. And the church is coming on board. Every community, we're going to touch them. We're going to meet with the guys in their community and we're going to tell them, hey, we got to drop murder this year. Murder must go down, far down. And we're going to get it loud and clear that the way we're living as a nation cannot continue to be. And we're going to fight for this nation. Some of us will die in the process, but we got to get ready, amen, to take this nation out of the rut. And guess what? The church plays a very pivotal role. It was Joseph who went and solved the problem in Egypt. It was David who went and solved the problem in killing Goliath and helped Israel. It was Daniel who went over into Babylon. Men of God, women of God, you got to step in now because, of course, the prime minister said he tried the hardware, it worked. He tried the software, it worked. He said, but he can't deal with the hardware. And he said that in 2021, he's calling the spiritual surgeons to come and deal with the hearts of the men because the hearts of the men are wicked. Wicked hearts are out there. And I know the prime minister can solve that. And the minister of security can solve that. It takes the man of God, the woman of God, who will deal with the spiritual aspect. And I kept saying it. It's a spiritual problem too. It's not just extortion. It's not just that is coming. It's a spiritual situation that is hanging over this country. And the spiritual surgeon, which is the church, has to come out of our 4 walls. We too many of us are just in our 4 walls having church. We have to move from the 4 walls and hit the communities and deal with the men in their own corner. Some of these guys not coming to our church. You got to find them where they are. It happened in Torspen. 18 years, Torspen hasn't seen one murder in that community. It's just last week they went in and killed 8 people in Torspen. Listen, what we did in Torspen is go knock on doors. And Al Miller came with his men and Fraternal came with their men. We knock on every door. We tell the guys, we can't live this kind of way. In those days, we were killing 4 or 5 people in Torspen every day. But it stopped for 18 years. We haven't seen anything like that.
We have to go.
We got to change the whole trajectory.
We have to go. We have to go, sir. We have to go. Thank you so much for spending some time with us this morning. Look after yourself. Look after the folks in St. Catherine. And God bless you and your family, sir. Thanks for speaking with us this morning.
Keep doing what you're doing, sirs and ma'am. Yep. God bless you.
Thank you.
Chairman of the 10,000 Men and Families Movement, Bishop Dr. Rowan Edwards.
Passion, you know?
Yep.
Passion, you know?
Yep.
Oh, boy.